Well, today you join me back out on the bank of the famous Carp Society's Horseshoe Lake down in Lechlade, and this is going to be a brand new series for Daiwa Carp, covering some of my own personal fishing as well as some of my work alongside Daiwa. I've been let loose over the last couple of months with my phone, capturing what I've been getting up to. We decided to throw it all together into a little video to give you an insight into what I've been getting up to, as well as me carp fishing, fishing for a few other species, a bit of me work life and that as well. Today you join me, it's probably the first session I've been back on here since spawning, so hopefully the fish are up for a bit of a munch, but whilst we're sitting with the rods out, we're going to take a little look at what I've been up to over the last couple of months. So my first trip back on here was back at the end of March now. It was a freezing cold northwesterly, but from my experience, the fish always turn up on that wind. So I had a rough idea of where I wanted to be before I got to the lake, and one of my top choices was free, so I jumped straight in there and got set about finding a nice little clean area. On that particular bank, there's not a lot of clean ground out there. There's a lot of silkweed, so it's a case of trying to find the cleanest drop at a comfortable range, getting about, putting 3 rods out with a bit of bait over the top. Nothing happened for the first night and the next day. There were a few fish caught elsewhere, but there wasn't really anywhere else that sort of gave me a rough idea of where I wanted to move to, so I stuck with it. One thing I did change is that I always favour a lead clip setup, but I decided to change over to a heli to try and ensure I had the best presentation possible for as long as possible over the silkweed. What you can find on here, especially on some of these bigger pits with the undertow, is the silkweed can lift and drop through the day and cover over your rigs and your bait, so I wanted to make sure my rigs were presented for as long as possible, and that really did pay off, because on the last morning I woke up to a very slow, steady take, picked up into my first fish. That turned out to be a bit of a strange character fish. We couldn't really tell if it was a common or a fully scaled, but it was a fully scaled mirror, and we got it up on the mat. Before I could actually get that one out on the mat as well, I did have another bite that turned out to be a tench, so it was clear there was a few fish in the area, and the change over to the helis was ensuring my rigs were presented ready for when the fish turned up. It turned out to be a really busy morning. I ended up with 5 fish in the end, up to 27 pound. A couple of little characters in amongst that. I had a small little common, one of the little farrier stockies we think that got put in here, a nice big scaly mirror that actually done me in a tree right in the margin, but a little bit of steady pressure, managed to get that one in as well. So 5 fish in the morning, managed to land all of them as well, so that was a right result for my first trip back to the fishery.
Just when I thought it was all over, one more before we head home. Lovely.
The following week I got invited out by a couple of friends to head over to Durley Reservoir down in Somerset. It's a big old bit of water, knew it was going to be range work, so I knew I was going to draw for the Infinity X45 rods for my long range setup. Started chucking around a couple of solid bags, picked up the old bream as normal on there, before finding a comfortable distance to put a few rigs out long and fill it in with a bit of boilie and hope of a few carp coming along. In hindsight, it was probably a little bit too early in the year. There was a few fish caught down the far end and a couple of fish showing in the out of bounds area to the left of where I was fishing. But a good old day, and nice to have a good old chuck with the Infinity X45 rods. After my first trip on Horseshoe, I was gagging to get back, the hope of catching a few more lovely carp in here. So I got down for another trip. I only had one night, so I made sure to spend plenty of time having a good old wander around, trying to find a few fish. There wasn't a great deal to go on, the lake was quite busy, so I just went on previous knowledge, went up in what they call the channel in between Winter Bay and the main section of the lake, where it's a little bit narrower, so I can reach the middle, and decided to go for zigs for the night. There were a few fish caught opposite me, and when I woke up the next morning, there was a few fish with their backs out right up on the surface, so I had a little play around with different depths, different ranges, but nothing was really happening my side of the lake for whatever reason. Getting a little bit frustrating, so decided to pack up and go for one last look round before I headed home. Managed to get a tip off from a mate. There were a few fish showing in another area, so I had a little look around there, and it didn't take long to spot a few. There was absolutely loads of fish crashing on the end of the wind, so zigs cast at shows, but even then it was still ridiculously frustrating how many fish were showing. I thought I was going to catch one instantly. They normally absolutely love a zig on here, but after a couple of hours of changing different depths, I managed to get a couple of bites in quick succession on shorter zigs, about 3 or 4 foot in about 6-7 foot of water. A couple of smaller ones, did go on to lose one as well, just where I think they were just snatching at the zigs and not really committing, but it was good to save the session with a couple of bites before I headed home. Number 2. Following on from that, I ended up back down here the following week. It was over a weekend, which is never a great sign. Normally at work, being on a rota means I do get a lot of fishing midweek, which is really handy for the busy day tickets and that sort of thing. But still wanted to get out there and give it a go. The lake was really busy, so I decided to set up in a less favoured area, little quiet corner down in Summer Bay. That's always done a few bites for me. So again, little led around. It was really devoid of weed, so I didn't expect there to be loads of fish holding out there, but there's always a couple of residential fish in Summer Bay that hide out in the sort of corners and the snags along there. So we're still confident of being able to pick up a bite or two. Gave him a little bit of bait, not too much, didn't want to attract the attention of the birds and the swans too much. So I went quite lightly with the bait, and the next morning I did manage to catch a small little original. It's actually one I've caught before the previous spring, so he obviously likes me and he likes living in that area. But a lovely fish all the same. And at the complete other end of the spectrum, I was back down the lake a couple of days later. I think it was a Monday, and there was only about 3 or 4 anglers on, so I had a choice of all the favoured swims. Managed to get in a really consistent swim known as Winter Point that I fished a few times, know all the spots. It was real mild and muggy when I turned out. There's quite a lot of mozzies about on the surface, big hatch going on, so I did cast zigs around for a couple of hours, but that didn't really pay off, so decided to set my stall up for the night, give them a big hit of bait over 2 rods, and fish another rod down the side of the swim a little bit shorter, on a small little siltier patch that tends to pick up a couple of bigger fish in my experience in that swim over a couple of sessions. Nothing happened overnight. Picked up a tench in the early hours of the morning, but come sort of like 5-6 o'clock, just before first light, did have an absolutely lovely 27-pound mirror, sort of a half limb, broken limb, sort of 2-tone mirror. Not one I've seen before as well, so really good to get that one in. A couple of hours later, picked up another one, about 23 pound if I remember right. I think what happened though for the rest of that session, where I was expecting a few more bites, because there was nobody on the far bank, the fish followed the wind, passed around the back of my spot and ended up down the far end in the corner. So I missed out on potentially a couple more bites, but the lake didn't do a huge deal whilst I was there for that session, so it was nice to get a couple of bites when the rest of the lake was fishing relatively quiet. Just to cover the setup I've been using for all of my spring on Horseshoe, and probably the last 18 months of my carp fishing predominantly, it's been the Emblem rods and reels, the Emblem 12-foot 3.5 pound rods, and the Emblem 45 SCW QD OT reels. The little gold spool ones with the wooden handles. They're really tarty, but it's one of my favourite setups. The rods themselves got the perfect balance of play and action and casting ability to ensure I can get nice big heavy leads out there. When the wind's hacking through on here, I need to put a 4.5 ounce lead on, get it out on the spot to make sure it's not going to deviate on me cast. It's absolutely perfect for that, but at the same time, when the fish are fighting really hard through some of the savage weed beds on here, I've got absolute confidence that I'm not going to pull hooks out and be able to get the fish moving out of the weed bed and get them in the net. The reels themselves as well, really smooth and great line lay. There's no leaders allowed on here on Horseshoe, so I'm using 15 pounds straight through, and the line lay on that allows me to get out to the spot, probably up to around 110, 120 yards, pretty comfortable without the need for a leader. And then following on from that, it's always a funny time sort of around May, June, when the fish get a little bit spawny, so decided to sort of knock it on the head for the carp fishing really. I had a couple of trips out on the boat sea fishing, something I've never really done before, but the benefit of working with a couple of guys in the shop that do a bit of sea fishing, got invited out onto a trip with a couple of the work lads, and I think over 2 trips, one out from Minehead, one from Watch It, I managed 6 different species that I've never caught before, dogfish, bull huss, smooth hound, a couple of rays, some conger eels. Really good fun to sort of take it away from the carp fishing and try something different, and I'm looking forward to doing a couple more trips in the future as well. And that about rounds up what I've been up to over the last couple of months. I'm still not 100% sure what I'm going to be doing over the summer and the rest of the year with tickets and that sort of thing. There's still a lot of fishing here that I'd like to tick off the list before my ticket runs out in August, so hopefully put in a couple more months work over the summer and try and catch a few of those better ones in here. Got another ticket as well that I've been doing a little bit of time on as well, and be sure to show you a few of the fish I've been catching from there in the next instalment.